I know sometimes when I talk about people that I'm going to get, that's my guy. That's my guy. Don't talk about him. He's always good. I think we can all agree, though, when you watch this, there are some troubling things here.
If it's not requiring her to sin, but simply hurting her, then I think she endures verbal abuse for a season, and she endures perhaps being smacked one night, and then she seeks help from the church. If it's not requiring her to sin, but
Take it in.
simply hurting her, then I think she endures verbal abuse for a season, and she endures perhaps being smacked one night, and then she seeks help from the church. If it's not...
All right. The other ones, we were having a little bit of fun, poking fun at people just saying crazy things. This is also crazy, but it's super sad. Like this is deeply troubling. I was not aware of this clip. A lot of times people share stuff and I'm like, yeah, I saw that like 15 years ago. Like, I don't know why everyone's surprised by this. I had not seen this. And, I knew that I had a lot of differences with John Piper on complementarianism and his staunch view of it with Wayne Grudem and the what is that book? Recovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. I don't know. I have that book. I've read it. I've had to do, seminary work on it, whatever. But I know I have disagreements on him on this issue. I was not aware that he had this kind of a thought. This is terrible, and it's unbiblical, and really it's unpastoral, and it's kind of shocking to me. Like you could be like, oh, all complementarians. Like I know I talk to a lot of people on every side of an issue. So there's lots of people who are like, complementarians are always the worst, and like there's part of me that understands that. And there are other people who are like, no, it's just everything is feminism and like, rah, and they don't have as much of a point. But I understand, like, there's a lot of people who watch this and they have different views on this issue. But this is just not good. What is being said here, and in the context, I've watched the bigger clip, and it's basically like, hey, when is too far, for like getting basically separation or leading to divorce. But how can a woman who is in a harmful relationship with her husband still submit to his leadership? And like, I have issues with that. Like, again, I've got differences on complementarianism, but what he's saying here is that women have to take it. And what you don't hear, which is just shocking to me, is the authorities. And in the broader context, he's not bringing that up at all. If your husband hits you, you call the cops. You don't call your pastor. Not first. You don't call people in your church first. You call the cops. If your husband hits you, you call the cops. That's the easiest thing in the world for any pastor to say. But apparently, it's impossible for some people. And for John Piper, he's like, no. Sometimes like verbal abuse. A woman doesn't have to take verbal abuse. A man doesn't have to take verbal abuse, for a season. No. Like he like what he's trying to get at is go to the church and you could have church discipline. And like all of these things should be dealt with by church discipline, but we know how that goes. One, that's not everything that church discipline is designed for. All right. Church discipline isn't for dealing with every world problem. All right. There are things that you have to go talk to the authorities about that have nothing to do with how the process of church discipline is going to go right off the bat. And this is one of those issues. If there's abuse in the home, and I'm just going to say it because it's statistically, you look at everything. I don't care what all these guys are trying to say now. Man, some of these guys out here who hate egalitarianism so much. You're just like, well, don't you know it's the woman that mostly does it? It's the woman that mostly abuses. And it's like, what? No. Look at any stats from any solid resource, and you're going to see it's the men. It's the husbands who the vast majority of abuse that happens in the home, it's going to be the husband abusing the wife. Okay. So if that's happening, that wife should call the police, and the police should deal with that husband. Now, there are effects, secondary effects of going through church discipline. I do believe that if you are abusing your spouse, you should go through church discipline. Absolutely. But that isn't your first call. And, just to be like, oh, it happened once. Once is enough. Once is enough for the cops to be called. If the woman wants to call the cops, it's not just like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Now you've ruined your family. No, he ruined the family when he hit her. Like there's so much that's like just sitting underneath what was just said by him. Like there's blame that's just sitting there, as if if the woman does something, that it's going to ruin things in the family. No, the abusive husband is the one who's ruining the family. I'll just say, if I'm pastoring a church right now, and a woman comes to me and says that her husband hit her last night, we are sitting together and calling the police. We're not calling the husband to get his side of the story. We are not, calling together the elder board to talk about it. I'm not calling, a close friend of hers to get her, to have someone to commiserate with or whatever, or comfort her. I'm first calling the police. I don't know why that's so difficult. It's 3 numbers. It's not that hard to remember. And you just call those 3 numbers and you're going to get help. And then from there could be other things that happen. And it doesn't mean that husband is going to go to prison. A lot of people think that, he's going to go to prison. He's going to ruin his life, whatever. But that's the same for anyone who commits a crime. And hitting your wife is a crime. If you commit a crime, there are going to be punishments for that crime. Even if you're like, oh, it was only one time I robbed the bank. Cop's going to be like, I don't care. You're going to prison. So I don't know why it's just like, oh, it was just one time. It's not that big a deal. You don't want to, ruin things. It's like, well, he ruined things when he made that decision. But there's just so much wrong here. So much wrong here. And there's so much just sitting underneath the surface of why someone would say that, because it's just common sense to just call the police, let them deal with it. And like I said, it doesn't mean that he's going to go to prison, but they're going to be able to step in and be like, okay, well, we know that this happened. You don't have to press charges, but we know that this happened. There might be some consequences for it. It might not always be prison, but it's now on public record. It's not a matter of, well, I told my pastor and, we decided it wasn't a big deal, and then no one believes you later. You get it on public record, this happened, and then you could deal with the consequences of that thing that your husband did. And no pastor should be like, oh, we need to sit on this. We need to sit on this. And, oh, she's not sure if she wants to call the cops. No, you convince her. You can convince her. She needs it. She a woman who's being abused isn't thinking things through in that way, probably. And the pastor is sitting there as a third party and should have the objective position of being able to be like, okay, no, you really do need to call the cops. I know you don't want to. I know you don't feel like you need to, but you do need to, because this is where it could go. And instead of just being like, oh, well, the church will deal with it. It's not what the church is for. The church is not meant, Paul says this, the church is not meant to govern laws. No, you deal with theology, you deal with sin that's happening within the church. But when it comes to criminal activity, you let the civil authorities know. and they deal with it. And then, yes, there are going to be consequences within the church. What happens there, church discipline should happen. But it's not the first thing that happens, and it shouldn't be a process. Oh, you just endure. That's what he said.
For a season, and she endures perhaps being smacked one night, and then she seeks help from the church. If it's not requiring her to...
One, that's assuming that the church would even do anything. And I think we've seen it a lot in this culture where, no, the church doesn't always do anything. And maybe they're not going to believe you. Maybe if you don't have a black eye or a bruise, they're going to be like, oh, did he just kind of get in your bubble a little bit? Well, it was only just like a kind of a push, or was it just like a show of force? If your husband pushes you, call the cops. Problem solved. Like, not solved, but like, at least for the pastor, of like, what is the next step? That's it. Call the cops. Oh, hey, you watched the whole video. Sorry, I'm just doing my light rating here. If you watched the whole video, that means that you probably liked it. So might as well hit the like button before you click over here on what YouTube thinks you should watch. I have zero idea what it is. None.